And our visit at the Laredo Country Club with former Comptroller John Sharp, who's contemplating running when and if U.S. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison resigns her post to run for the governor's office now occupied by Rick Perry. We talked to former Comptroller Sharp about what he would do if elected for the United States Senate. Mr. Sharp, why are you running for the United States Senate?
Well, that's where the problems are. The United States Senate, not necessarily the state of Texas, is where every problem that you can name that's been caused by government has been caused by Washington, D.C. And I think that if I were 40 years old or younger, I would be worried to death about what was fixing to happen to me and the debt that I was going to have to encumber. Not just from the bailouts that are occurring now, just not from that money that's being spent, but from what is happening to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, those indebtedness things, forget the national debt, but those things that we have obligated a 29-year-old to right now amounts to $477,000 per family. Now, something has to happen. Social Security is going to start turning negative in the year 2017. We've got about 3 or 4 years to fix those problems. And one of the things that I think I was pretty good at when the state legislature, when people were calling for income taxes and things like that, is I figured out a way to save $8.5 billion by cutting spending one way or the other, keep the schools open when everybody thought schools were going to close, and I think I can take a little common sense to Washington, D.C. and see if maybe we can save some money up there.
You must have been pretty good at it, because the best endorsement you've had was Republican Governor Rick Perry called on you from across the aisle to come in and help him fix some problems.
Well, they had a basket case. I mean, they had, this was a couple of years ago, schools were fixing to close. The governor had taken his best shot at it. The Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst had failed in what he was trying to promote. Speaker Craddock had failed in what he was trying to promote. And so I figured it couldn't do any worse, but we did manage coming up with a compromise that allowed the schools to stay open and funded. So we were pretty pleased with that.
Your reaction to the two United States Senators, Hutchison and Cornyn, missing key votes on the stimulus package, being opposed to it, obviously, and those dollars now coming to the Lone Star State thanks to your party and to your president, President Obama. Number two, in actual funds coming to the Lone Star State behind California. Those stimulus dollars are going to be important, in your reaction to the triumvirate of Perry, Hutchison, and Cornyn being opposed to it.
Well, one of the problems that you have right now is that with whether you like or dislike the partisanship that exists in Washington, D.C., and I have some problems with that kind of partisanship, whether it's the Republicans in charge of the Senate or Democrats in charge of the Senate. But right now, the Democrats are in charge of the Senate. And if you're having a discussion on funding for I-69, or you're having a discussion on funding for Kelly Air Force Base, we don't have anybody in the room, because those two Republican senators aren't invited to be a part of that process. And one of the things that Lyndon Johnson always said, and John Tower said, and Lloyd Benson always said, the one thing they all agreed on was that you need one Republican and one Democrat in the United States Senate to make sure Texas interests are served, and I hope to be that one Democrat. And I think we have an opportunity to do some good things for Texas.
Time for a bipartisan representation at the U.S. Senate.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think Thomas Jefferson was right when he said that partisanship is going to wreck this country, and I think we're just about there. And somebody has to start to go into Washington, D.C., considering the country first and their party second. That's just, that is a huge problem right now, and has been for 30 years.
Mr. Sharp, why is education so important at the border?
Same reason it's important everywhere, because if the future of what Texas is about is no longer just about oil and cattle and cotton, and those things were real important. They made tons of money for lots of people in this state, but the future of what this state is about is human resources, not natural resources. And Texas, particularly South Texas, is going to have more 18 to 21-year-olds for people to hire than almost any place in the nation. If they are well-educated 18 to 21-year-olds, we're going to create an economic boom bigger than oil, bigger than cattle, bigger than cotton ever was. If they're not educated, we got real problems.
And these youngsters primarily live south of I-10, between I-10 and the border.
You bet. You bet. And it's a huge asset for the state of Texas if we make darn sure that those kids are healthy and that they're well educated, got good teachers in the classroom.
But these children have been shortchanged. The last incomplete interstate is the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, I-69 still not completed.
Yeah, for infrastructure, education, a lot of different things, South Texas, including the area that I'm from around Victoria, has kind of come from behind. I mean, we've had to sort of scratch for everything in the legislature. But beginning in the late 80s and early 90s, South Texas and our legislative delegation started kind of strutting their stuff and helps. Judy Safrini, chairman of the Higher Education Committee, has to make a big difference for South Texas. And so we've come into our own, and I think that a lot of people realize that South Texas is going to play a big role in whatever elections come up for anybody in the future, and so they have to pay attention to us.
John Sharp, an impressive guy.
He is, very impressive.
What did he say that really struck a chord with you that you think the people of Texas watching the program might also be inspired by?
Well, one thing about John is his experience. He focused on human resources. And ever since I've known John as controller, on his reports, for example, named the Against the Grain, the reports that he's published and actually utilized and implemented while he was controller are going to be extremely helpful. I believe that's what U.S. needs today, is some of John Sharp's idea. He's a nuts and bolts kind of guy, and I believe that's what we need for someone in the U.S. Senate.
Even Republican Governor Rick Perry made some similar remarks about the people capital of the state, predominantly in the south of I-10, in a speech in New Braunfels where I was in attendance. And so even Texas Governor Rick Perry understands and similarly speaks in the same kind of vein that John Sharp just did.
He does, because we see the human capital, human resources are key. You get folks educated, get them into the workforce. And of course you got all these other incidentals and peripheral type of issues where you need to also focus on that, i.e., economic development, et cetera. But the human resource has been one of John Sharp's strongest arguments ever since he's been controller, and we've agreed with him on that. And we've seen some of his projects where he's worked on and making that happen.
Former State Representative Jim Solis, 15 years in the Texas Legislature, District 38. Thank you for coming and being with us.
Thank you, Ron.
We hope to have you on our program in future telecasts as they come along.
Thank
you for joining us here on the program. Till next time, adios.